Sure. So Pete is a Holocaust survivor. He was born in Germany. And when the Nazis invaded, he and his family went to what is now the Czech Republic. They weren't there very long because then the Nazis did invade over there as well. So from there, they went down to Italy. And then, of course, as we know through history, Italy was not a great place to be either. So then from there, they ended up in Ecuador. And that's where they found safety before finally moving to the United States. But thankfully, Ecuador opened their doors to Pete and thousands of other refugees. And yeah, I'm very proud of Ecuador for doing that.
Sometime in the 1950s, I can't tell you the exact year, the German army was reconstituted. And the U.S. Army searched for German-speaking GIs. And I was one of those selected. There was maybe 8 of us. And we were sent to Mühlheim to act as interpreters to explain American weaponry to German officers. So each one of us Americans had an American second lieutenant and a German second lieutenant, and we explained to the Germans how American tanks, machine guns, and all that worked. The first day, there was a food tent set up where the German officers were going to have lunch, and no one told me where I was going to have lunch. So I stood there like a fool out in this open field, and this German captain came up to me, clicked his heels and saluted, and said the colonel would like to have me join him. So I sat next to this German colonel, and he asked me, inevitably, how come I speak such fluent German? And I was damned if I wasn't going to tell him to break up here. So I lied, and I said my father worked for the German embassy in Berlin before the war. That's how I learned German.
Everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. It's a joy for me today to have Darlene on the podcast. We're talking about what she's up doing in the world, but she's brought along an amazing friend who's got a great story to share with us. And I'm thrilled to have Pete here with us as well. And we're going to hear from Pete here in a moment. Pete's coming to us with our very rich history and a lot of great things to share with us. And I'm so excited to have Pete here as well. Darlene, as our author on the show, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. Glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Darlene, tell everybody where you are in this big world of ours.
So I live in Houston, Texas. I was born and raised here. However, my family is Ecuadorian. I was the only family member to be born in the United States. But I have been back to Ecuador, and I speak Spanish and eat Ecuadorian cuisine. So it is still part of my heritage as well.
So we have listeners in Ecuador. Would you like to say hi to them? Because they're listening to us right now.
Sure. Hola, gracias por escucharnos.
There you go, just like that. And that's great. Thank you for being here. Now, you've brought along a friend today, and I'm thrilled that he's here with us. His name is Pete. Can you just kind of give us just a quick introduction to Pete? I want to send it over to him as well, but can you just tell us a little bit about Pete?
Sure. So Pete is a Holocaust survivor. He was born in Germany. And when the Nazis invaded, he and his family went to what is now the Czech Republic. They weren't there very long because then the Nazis did invade over there as well. So from there, they went down to Italy. And then, of course, as we know through history, Italy was not a great place to be either. So then from there, they ended up in Ecuador. And that's where they found safety before finally moving to the United States. But thankfully, Ecuador opened their doors to Pete and thousands of other refugees. And yeah, I'm very proud of Ecuador for doing that.
Wow, that's amazing. Pete, welcome to the podcast. I'm glad to have you here. Where are you joining us from today, Pete?
Bethesda, Maryland.
There you go. Excellent. Well, welcome to the podcast. Pete, have you been on a podcast before?
Well, we Zoom with my wife's half-brother who is in Brazil.
Oh, nice.
We do that 3 months or so.
Well, there you go. Well, you're an expert at this, and I'm glad to have you here. Welcome to the show. Can you fill in the blanks here for Darlene and myself? What else are we missing from your story? I would love to kind of start there, Pete, if you can kind of take us through that.
Well, let's see, and I'll just talk about things that are germane to this topic, if I can. In 1993, the Holocaust Museum in Washington opened, and I was one of the founding volunteers, which meant that I was in a class of volunteers before the museum actually was finished. And we went through, I think, 6 or maybe 8 weeks of training. Excuse my voice. And it was a thrill to be there. The moment I read in the Washington Post that there was going to be a Holocaust museum, I knew I had to be there. I didn't know how to go about making the contact. I called all my Jewish friends, and finally I met someone who gave me a number, who gave me another number, and they asked me what I wanted to do, and I had no idea that it would be such a grand museum in its own building. I was thinking of a small-scale remembrance. They asked me what I could do, and I said, I'm willing to wash the men's room if necessary. And I meant it. But it turned out not to be necessary. So I volunteered there for 10 years, and it was a very fulfilling thing to do.
I love that you have that connection, Pete, to be able to come there and be a part of that and be a part of that story as well, and have people come and experience that.
Because I was so grateful to have escaped with our family intact. And of course, I worked with a lot of other volunteers who had much more dramatic stories than I did, and made a lot of friends, and it was a good part of my life those 10 years. And that's how I met Darlene.
So that was the connection then.
Yes, it was.
Excellent. Darlene,
I got a call one day from someone at the museum and asked if I would be willing to sit for an interview. I had no idea what it was about, and the one who wanted to interview was Darlene, and she can tell you the story better than I can.
So Darlene, how did you first come across Pete? How did that connection happen for you?
Sure. So when I was first working on my upcoming novel, which is titled The Center of the Earth, it'll be released by Blue Handle Publishing in the summer of 2025. So I started doing the research about 6 years ago, and the topic of Jewish refugees finding refuge in Ecuador during World War II was a topic that really didn't have that many resources. So I was looking through archive after archive, just getting bits and pieces. But the problem was I didn't find enough sources to fully craft a story. So then what I did was I went on Facebook, and then I found a Facebook group called Jews of Ecuador, which is run by the children and grandchildren of some of these refugees. And I asked if I could join the group, and they let me in. And then I made a post saying I was looking for people to interview if anyone was still living and willing to talk. And within an hour, I had all kinds of responses. But then in one of those responses, someone suggested that I contact the Holocaust Museum in DC, and maybe they would have someone who had gone through this part of history. And then from there, that's where I found Pete. So then I contacted the museum and said, if he's available and he would like to talk to me for a little bit over the phone, I'd love to interview him. And then that's how they put us in touch. And we've been in touch ever since.
So what was that first initial meeting with Pete like, Darlene, to sit down with him and start talking through the story? What was that like to meet with him?
Well, to be honest, I don't do very well talking to new people. I'm pretty shy. It takes me a little bit to open up. So when I was conducting these interviews, I was very nervous talking to everyone. And that's exactly how I felt the first time I called him. I was kind of hoping he wouldn't answer because I wasn't ready to talk just yet. But he answered. So then I said, okay, well, I can't run away from this conversation, so I better get it started. And we talked for probably a little over an hour. I just got information about his childhood, what Europe was looking like, and how his parents were trying to find a safe place to be in with World War II raging on, and what his life was like in Ecuador, what kind of food he ate, what kind of games he played, what his school was like. And these are all details that archival resources don't give you. So if you're looking for an archive and you want some information such as World War II, it can tell you, this is what a typical pilot wore in World War II, but it doesn't tell you how the pilot felt during training or some of the, horrific things that they may have seen. So that's why I like to interview people who were really there, of course, if it's possible. And it really proved to be, it was a life-changing experience.
So, Pete, you were mentioning before we started recording that you were relatively young when all this started for you and your family. What are your earliest memories of your own personal memories? And I'm also curious to know kind of what your parents told you as you grew up, as you got older and maybe started asking more questions. But what were your early memories of all of this happening for you and your family?
My biggest regret in life, and I have many regrets, is that I never asked any questions and know very, very little of those 9 years from the time I was born to the time we landed in New York. My parents didn't talk about it, and I didn't ask questions. Children didn't ask questions in those days, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
Ironically, I made it my meager living as a journalist by asking questions, but that aside. So my earliest memory is, as I think I said earlier, watching the German troops march into Prague. We had a big window in our living room. It may have been on the ground floor, I think it was. So it was a very close-up view. And another thing I remember is that we needed passports and exit visas and all that, which was difficult to get. My mother knew some two brothers who had some connections and she gave them whatever money they asked for. And they didn't show up for months, I think, or weeks. And finally, we got our papers and left. And then I remember on the ship being seasick all the time.
That's a harsh trip to take. That's not a luxury cruise by any means.
By no means, no. And in Ecuador, I remember having to move several times because we lived in poor housing where the roof fell in after a heavy rain. And I was often accused of being a Christ killer. And, excuse me, I went to school, a private school. Was a boys' school. Very strict standards. So at one time I spoke Spanish as well as Darlene does now, but I've forgotten everything.
There you go.
In New York, I had two younger brothers, twins. We had no toys. We didn't speak English. We got beaten up by the neighborhood kids all the time. We were accused of being Germans. We were accused of being Jews. It was not the ideal growing up years. But I'm here and feel very lucky now to be here.
We talked before we started, Pete, as well. I shared a little of my wife's family's history from Holland. And as you remember, the army's marching into your city. My father-in-law was young. He remembered the Canadian army pushing the Germans through his yard at their farmhouse and seeing these Canadian badges on their shoulders and their guns as they kind of pushed the Germans through. And that made him want to come to Canada. Just seeing the bravery of these soldiers coming from another country to help save them in Holland.
Yeah.
And that was part of his story. And the fact that they were hiding pilots that were shot down over their farm, in their home. And they actually found two pilots from the same plane in two different locations on their property, hiding in like ditches and underneath things, and brought them back to safety. And if it hadn't have been for that family, that Dutch family protecting those pilots, they may not have ever gone home again.
Right.
And just that was such a, and when I hear my father-in-law talk about that, the passion, you can see him going back in his mind, back to those days, to what he can remember. But for you, Pete, as you kind of think back about this, and as you sit down with Darlene to share your story with her, is it hard to kind of go in your mind to that space and that time?
No, it isn't. It isn't. If I can tell an anecdote that may or may not be relevant,
please.
Sometime in the 1950s, I can't tell you the exact year, the German army was reconstituted. And the U.S. Army searched for German-speaking GIs. And I was one of those selected. There was maybe 8 of us. And we were sent to Mannheim to act as interpreters to explain American weaponry to German officers. So each one of us Americans had an American second lieutenant and a German second lieutenant, and we explained to the Germans how American tanks, machine guns, and all that worked. The first day, there was a food tent set up where the German officers were going to have lunch, and no one told me where I was going to have lunch. So I stood there like a fool out in this open field, and this German captain came up to me, clicked his heels and saluted, and said the colonel would like to have me join him. So I sat next to this German colonel, and he asked me, inevitably, how come I speak such fluent German? And I was damned if I wasn't going to tell him to break up here. So I lied, and I said my father worked for the German embassy in Berlin before the war. That's how I learned German. Sorry. No story. Sorry, I got emotional.
That's okay.
That's the end of that story. Okay.
Darlene, as you talk to Pete,
yes.
Darlene, in the writing of the book and interviewing Pete and stuff, what stood out to you as like moments, like, I know you're saying you're a little bit intimidated, a little nervous, a little shy to talk to Pete. Pete's an amazing human being, I gotta say. Like,
oh yeah,
as soon as he came on camera, I'm just like, I'm drawn to Pete. He's just like, he has this big smile that I love when he smiles.
It's a very good interview with contrary to what she thinks.
There you go. Okay, good. That's a good compliment right from there, from a journalist, right?
Oh,
that's
yeah.
a good.
Amazing.
More about my family than I do.
Yeah.
There you go. So, Darlene, as you're sitting there with Pete, what kind of feelings are you having? Was it more than you anticipated talking to Pete about this?
It definitely was. So I interviewed 8 refugees, and he was actually the youngest one at the time. So the oldest one, she's still living. She just turned 101 yesterday.
Wow.
And Pete is the youngest. I don't know if he wants to share his age. You know, I'll let him decide.
I'm 30.
But he was the youngest one. 39.
He's 39.
So with him, his story was interesting because since he was a little bit younger, he had a different perspective than the other refugees who were a little bit older. So, for example, one of them, he had just had his bar mitzvah ceremony. And then his parents sent him on the kinder transport to England. And then his parents went to Ecuador. So he was all by himself, had no idea what was going on, had no idea if his parents were still alive. And then one day, right before, borders and stuff were closing because the war was not coming to a stop, he got a letter from his parents saying, surprise, we're in Ecuador and we have a ship ticket for you to come down here. So he made that journey as, I think he was 14 or 15 at the time. So his story was very compelling for him to have done that all by himself. But then with Pete's story, because he was younger, his parents were a little more involved in the story. versus the older ones who had a slight different perspective. So I found that really interesting, that he was about 8 or 9 years old while the other ones were already, middle school age or like early high school kind of age. So that I found that really compelling.
Pete, so Pete, I live in Canada. I live in the same area of the world. I've lived here my whole life. I've lived in a peaceful country. I've never experienced having another group of people force me out of where I live, make me leave to go to somewhere else, and then kind of chase me around the world as I'm trying to find my home. I've never experienced anything like this. I would think, like for me, my identity is where I live, what I know, my language, my culture, everything I know is where I am. So how do you keep a sense of identity when you're moving from this country to this country, down to Ecuador, to the U.S.? Like, how does your family keep identity with all of these places you had to go to?
Excuse me. We were very proud to be Americans. In fact, my mother was the quintessential chauvinist about America. My parents are no longer alive, of course. Now I envy you for living in Canada. I wish I had lived in Canada, because this country is undergoing a major horror.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we have very dear friends in Toronto. We Zoom with them periodically. And the male of the couple is my only surviving male friend. I've either outlived all the others, or other things that occurred that broke up the friendship. It's very lonely. Thank goodness I have a wonderful wife who's sitting to my left. She's my administrative assistant.
Well, hello to her off camera.
I'm sorry?
Hello to her off camera. We're happy that she's here with us too.
Hello to you.
Hello. I love that.
Okay.
Well,
shall we continue with the questions?
Sure, Pete. So what does it mean for you, for Darlene, to include your story in what she's doing? How important is it for you to get your message out through Darlene so that other people can understand a little bit of this history that maybe some people don't really understand in the right way? How important is that for you?
It's very thrilling. And I feel very honored. I feel very honored to have Darlene a friend. And she is... Darlene, close your ears. She is a lovely humanitarian and very big-hearted and generous. And she has meant to both my wife and me, she's meant a lot to us.
Darlene,
I'm looking forward.
You can take your hands off your ears now, Darlene.
I did. It's very lovely to hear that. And yes, in the process of writing this novel, I was not expecting to form such close friendships to the point where, I would consider Pete and his wife almost like, adoptive grandparents, kind of close relationship. But that, such things happen in the process of writing a novel. Like I have another novel I wrote a couple years back called Summer Camp is Canceled, which is about a Mexican-American boy who has a huge crush on a girl who happens to be deaf. But her crush is the boy who bullies him at school. And he doesn't know if he should tell her the truth or not because he wants her to be happy, but he also wants to be with her, just middle school kind of drama. And in the process of writing that novel, I interviewed about 25 people who are hard of hearing or totally deaf.
Oh.
And they opened my eyes to things I don't even think about. Like one of them, she told me that she can never go see a new release of a movie in the theater because it's very hard to find a showing with captions. So she told me that she's forced to just wait until it comes out on streaming or DVD because usually the caption showing is during the middle of the week when she's at work and it's at 10 or 11 in the morning when she really can't make it. And then I thought, wow, these are all things that we take for granted. So writing a novel, especially when there's research involved, it really does open your eyes into how other people view the world.
I think she may be lucky because the movies are pretty lousy, most of them anyway.
Well, that's certainly one way to think about it.
Yeah. Wow. So, okay, again, let's go back to the journey itself, Pete. Like, any memories from your background, your history, just about the actual the logistics of actually moving around so much during all this time? Do you remember like the trips? Do you remember you said you were very seasick. What else do you remember about just the getting from this country to this country and all that? What do you remember?
Not a heck of a lot, but one of the things I remember is we had a duffel bag. We called it Molly's sack because evidently some woman by the name of Molly gave it to us. It was about at least 5 foot long, and all of our belongings, a family of 5, went into Molly's sack, and we carried that from country to country.
Wow.
Similar to an army duffel bag, only much, 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 much bigger. Did I mention that I was drafted, that I went to the army and was sent to Germany?
You mentioned going back to Germany, and yeah, a little bit about that, but tell us more about the drafting to go back.
Well, I actually wasn't drafted. I knew I was going to be drafted.
Okay.
So I volunteered for the draft. I had no idea I would be sent to Germany. I considered that a major plus. My German did not come in handy, except once in a while, some officer or sergeant, I would say, would send me into town to buy liquor. I did very little interpreting, but I was in the infantry, and it was difficult to see Germans in the street because you can't help wondering, what did you do during the war? Were you a Nazi? And I found that the Germans I met were not forthcoming. They lied. But ironically, I fell in love with a German girl, a Gentile girl. She was blonde. I have a weakness for blondes. And got engaged. My parents were not thrilled. My mother was so upset she threatened to commit suicide. And my father, a very wise man, sat me down and talked me out of it, which is what I did. Coincidentally, the girl's mother was Hitler's graphologist. What do you call that? Handwriting expert, analyst. And she didn't want her daughter to marry me any more than my parents wanted me to marry her. So it was a fiasco. Oh, thank goodness.
There you go.
It has a happy ending.
There you go. Wow. Darlene, what else are you excited about for this book, for the reader that's going to pick up a copy of this book when it comes out? What is your big hope for anybody that reads this book?
Well, the main mission of the book, I would say, is to basically show the world that while we as human beings have our differences, we all just really want to live normal lives. And there's really no reason to hate each other. And another part of it is the book it's definitely fiction, but there are a lot of true situations in the book, such as one of the characters is constantly seasick, and that is based on Pete being constantly seasick when he was on the ship to Ecuador. And there is another part where the character with his Jewish family, they're running out of food and they have to cut grapes into small pieces so that everyone can get an equal share. And that is also something that happened to Pete when he was growing up. So even though it is a fictional story, there are many true elements in it. But of course, when you're writing a book, you kind of have to play around with timelines. You have to play around with certain situations to make the story fit. I mean, this is why, not all historical stories are 100% accurate, because you just can't do it all the time. But one book I can think of off the top of my head is Ethel and Ernest, which is a graphic novel written by Raymond Briggs. And Ethel and Ernest is about his parents and how they met, how they got married, how they struggled with infertility, and then they finally had him. But there are moments in that book which are very kind of boring, and they kind of drag the story out. But then it's because he wanted everything to go the way that it did in real life. And sometimes real life can be kind of dull, So when writing a book, to avoid the dull moments, you kind of have to play around a little bit just so the reader doesn't, stop reaching.
Yeah.
And memory occurs to me, if I may go backwards, the time in Italy. My parents were constantly scrounging for food, which left me to take care of my two brothers. I was not quite 4 years older. They were twins. So difference in age, about 4 years. So I was in charge of them. I took them every day to a park, and every day we were attacked by Italian kids. We didn't know any Italian. We were Jews. They thought of us as Germans, and they beat us with chains. It was a miserable time, but it just occurred to me. Should have mentioned it earlier. So we were, I guess, trained for what we got when we got to New York. We lived in the upper part of Manhattan, near a parochial school, and the kids just had it in for us all the time. And if we had a toy, which would have come from a charity, they took it away from us. I saved up some money selling the Saturday Evening Post and bought a pair of roller skates. The first day on the skates out in the street, two toughs took my key away. You needed a key to put the roller skates onto a shoe. And you chew boy, you don't need that. And the roller skates were, of course, useless after that. Those were my growing up years in New York.
Pete, it just feels like everywhere that you went to get safety and security and to set up a new identity, you had to face another obstacle everywhere you went.
Yeah.
Whether it's the roof falling in on you in Ecuador because of the rain, somebody taking your roller skates. Like, there's so much where, it's like, I just think we could be better to each other as humans, right? I just think we don't understand each other, right? Whether it's language, whether it's the way we look, there's something that makes us different, and people just love to attack us for being different. Yeah. And I think that's part of what I think Darlene's trying to capture in this book, is that we need to stop being so hurtful to each other and try to help each other. I think that's what we need in the U.S., it's what we need in Canada, it's what we need around the world, is people who treat people better than they treat themselves.
I'd like to interview you.
You can interview me anytime, Pete. I would sit for that anytime. To see that smile, I would. Is that kind of catch some of the spirit of the book, Darlene?
Oh, absolutely. And it was truly an honor to interview these 8 refugees. Half of them have since passed on. And it does make me a little sad that they did not live long enough to see the release of the book. But as I said earlier, when I started interviewing them, most of them were already well into their 90s. So I knew that I really didn't have a lot of time. And I wish that, the book had found a publisher sooner, but such is the writing industry. It's rejection after rejection after rejection. And even sometimes I would advocate and say, some of these people are 95, 96, 97. Like, please just consider it. And I mean, that's just how the journey went. So, but I am glad that, even though, like I said, half of them are no longer with us, their story is going to live on through this book because there are bits and pieces of their stories that I put into my story as well. So,
yeah. Darlene, talk a little bit more about Blue Handle Publishing. I've had a few authors on from this amazing group of people at Blue Handle. Tell me why you like working with them for this project and what they can do possibly to help you or help other authors. Tell me about them a little bit more.
well, for one thing, they were the only publishing house that's giving the book a chance. So, big thumbs up for that. But what really drew me to working with them was they are from Amarillo, Texas. And Amarillo is not close to Houston at all. I think it's about 9 or 10 hours by car. But it is still Texas. So we have that in common. And they really like to work with authors from Texas. And then it just provides, a greater connection because, like I said, even though they are far away, a Texan in any part of Texas is a proud Texan. That's why we have the slogan, "Don't mess with Texas." And even though, no state is perfect, every state has its flaws. Being from Texas is it's different than being from a different state. Like sometimes when I would go to Europe as a kid and people would ask my family members and I where we were from, and we would say Texas, everyone immediately knew where that was because of the shape of the state. The shape is very distinct. So that's what drew me to them. And I am very grateful that they are taking a chance with my work.
That's good. Awesome. Pete, before we leave, first of all, I want to just say thank you for making time to come and be a part of this conversation and to know that your story lives on in Darlene's book. I just love this connection to have the two of you together with me at the same time. This is great.
It's my pleasure.
It's amazing to have you here. For those, Pete, that would like to come and see this this place that you were talking about that you got to volunteer at and everything for the Holocaust Museum, could you tell them a little bit more about that location and what they're going to see and experience when they come to this place?
The museum itself?
Yeah.
It's incredibly well done. Incidentally, the man who designed it was born in the same city as I was, Essen, Germany. I can't remember his name, but he's no longer alive. I only met him once. He had severe Parkinson's by the time I met him. The museum has, excuse me, it's on 14th Street. It's within walking distance of all the major attractions of Washington. It has 4 stories. You enter one of 3 elevators, and you go up to the 4th floor, and the exhibits tell the story of the Holocaust in very graphic terms, photographs, films, voices of survivors. There are models of the crematoria. There are some exhibits. Mind you, I haven't been there in more than 10 years. They may have changed, but there were exhibits showing some of the medical experiments the Nazis carried out, which are behind 3-foot-high concrete walls, so that little kids can't see it.
A cattle.
What, love?
A cattle.
Oh, there's a cattle car, which is on loan from Poland, and in the 10 years I was there, I never walked through that cattle car. Couldn't do it. And the first few times I was there, the first few weeks, was very emotional, and people got very emotional. Part of the training was from a psychiatrist, by the way, how to deal with visitors who are overcome. There's an exhibit also of the bunks in Auschwitz where the prisoners slept, jammed in like sardines or worse. There are other souvenirs. It's quite an experience to walk through there. It's extremely well done, I think. There's also a part which again may not exist anymore, called a Daniel story, which is designed for little kids. Not little kids, but the audience that Darlene is addressing in her book, which tells the story of the Holocaust in the eyes of a young boy named Daniel. Also very well done. It's and they've had millions of visitors, which they never expected. I never expected it to be that popular, and I'm so glad that it is. Occasionally, there are exhibits about other atrocities, if you will. What happened in? I can't remember the.
There's one, I don't know if it's still ongoing at the moment, but last year when I was in DC, my husband and I visited, and they had an exhibit about the Syrian war.
Right.
And it mostly was about how it's affecting the children of Syria.
That kind of exhibit is separate from the actual Holocaust, yes. So the museum goes out of its way to point out that the Holocaust was not the only Holocaust. There are Holocausts going on even as we speak.
Right.
In Gaza, for instance.
One thing I would like to mention before we sign off is
sure.
The United States Holocaust Museum in DC was a tremendous help with my research. And even though when people visit, usually they stay in the exhibit area, which is the first 4 floors. The library, I believe, is located on the 5th floor. And you do need an appointment to go visit, which is what I did when I first started my research. But I could not believe how incredible the archivists were in this library. They helped me figure out how to view a microfilm because I had heard of microfilms, but I didn't know how that worked. And they showed me how to use it. And there was one piece of, it was the private files of a man who had gone to Ecuador as a young adult, probably 17, 18 years old. And he, for whatever reason, wrote diary entries and had saved newspapers from Ecuador and from Germany. And he had donated everything to the museum after his death. And the museum had not archived these pieces of information yet. But when I was there, one of the archivists, he said, let me do it for you real quick. Give me 30 minutes. And then he went through all these resources and put them on a flash drive for me to take back home to Houston. And he just said, think of it as a late Christmas gift. And I'm so grateful that he did that for me. His name was Livu. I don't remember his last name at the moment, but if you're listening, Livu, I am so grateful for how you really went out of your way to help me. So I am so grateful for all the archivists that I came across during this research.
Wow.
I wish I were as articulate as Darlene is. I speak well without a drink, and I don't have a drink.
Again, I'm so thrilled, Pete, to have time with you.
Very nice to be here.
Thank you for sharing your message with us and to hear your voice. Again, I love your smile. When you smile, Pete, it makes me so happy. So thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you.
For your lovely wife in the background there supporting you and cheering you on. Thank you to her as well. Darlene, any last little message that you have for Pete here as we're wrapping up?
Sure. I just wanted to tell you, thank you so much for being willing to talk to me and for forming such a great relationship after the book has been written and it's on its way to being published next year. I'm so excited that you were part of it.
It's my pleasure. And I'm still alive next year.
No, well, knock on wood. So
there we go.
You did a terrific job, and you too, Darlene.
Thank you.
Oh, that's high praise right there. That's high praise. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Darlene, again, tell us about your website, where we're going to be able to get the book in the future. Tell us all about that. We're also going to put a link for the museum as well in the notes so people listening can then plan a trip to go there and to honor Pete and his family, to go through that museum and spend some time there. But Darlene, where can we find you and where can we get the book when it comes out?
Sure. So all my buy links are on my website, which is www.darlenepcampos.com. And I also have a blog on there that I really don't update as often as I should, but I do every so often. And on my blog, I do historical research and I write short historical articles about the findings that I've come across. And as for the book, it is slated to be released in summer 2025, and it's going to be available wherever you buy books, Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, et cetera, et cetera. So very excited about that. And as for the
New York Times bestseller list.
There you go.
And as for the museum, one of the refugees I interviewed, she died in the fall of 2023. And her final wish was that people across the world would make a donation, even if it was just $1 in her name. And her name was Eva Fish de Roger. It's a French last name, so it's Desrosiers. But yeah, if you can spare just $1 or $2 in her name, I know it would make her very, very happy. So thank you for supporting my work, and thank you for having me on your podcast.
Excellent. Pete, thank you so much again for the big smile.
Nice.
Again, thank you so much for being here, sharing your story with us through the book, on the podcast as well. Such an honor to meet you, Pete.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being a great inspiration, for sharing
Thank
your
you,
story.
Darlene.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Dave.
Excellent, everyone. All the information, as always, in the show notes. Make sure you go leave a great donation to this museum. Let them know that you heard about this here on the podcast. Celebrate with Darlene and Pete when the book comes out as well. And I'm so proud of the two of you that you've made this connection and that we can continue sharing this story long into the future. Thank you to you both.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening all the way to the end of the podcast. That's a big signal to all of the players, the YouTubes, the Apples, the Spotifys, that you found value in this episode of Living the Next Chapter. Just by you listening to the end. You just sent a huge bat signal out to the app saying this was a great podcast, a great conversation. So you listening to this point, you've done your job. I have one more ask of you. If you know anyone that would benefit from this conversation, would you share this episode with them? Would you just get on, send them a message, send them the episode, tell them about this episode, tell them to livinginthenextchapter.com to get all the information about the podcast. Can you do that for me? Because the more people that hear this message, this episode, the better. I want to support these amazing authors. And I know you do as well. So sharing this episode really helps. And I appreciate you. See you on the next episode. And thank you for listening to Living the Next Chapter.